Ahoy! I'm David Perry, the host of 10%. Tonight, a very special episode where we celebrate our 300th original show of your LGBT TV, right here on Comcast Hometown Network 104. When I was a little boy growing up in Richmond, Virginia, my grandma always said the two magic words were thank you and please. So I'd like to start out by saying thank you to Comcast, Xfinity, and Comcast Hometown Network since 2009, allowing me to be here as your host for 10%. Tonight, as we celebrate our 300th original episode, I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to turn the tables, and I'm going to be the guest. So using my grandmother's other favorite word, please welcome Karli Mullane of Upside.
Thank you for having me, David.
Well, thanks for being on the show.
I mean, 300 episodes, a huge, major milestone. I have to ask, what are you feeling in this moment?
Well, I'm kind of excited and a little nervous, I have to admit. I keep wanting to interview you, so you'll stop me.
Got to reel that in, yeah. Well, let's go back to the beginning. How did the idea for this show come about? Well,
I always say work with people smarter than you. They make you look good. And in my case, I married someone smarter than me, my husband, Alfredo. He came up with the name 10%. And actually, Comcast approached me and asked me if I wanted to do an LGBT content show, and I said, yeah. And they said, what's your concept? And I said, Charlie Rose. You know, nothing wrong with casual interview shows, but I think a lot of people want to hear real questions. They want in-depth answers. So I said, give me a table, give me a guest, and I want to interview people that are of interest to the LGBT community. So that doesn't necessarily mean all of our guests are openly gay or lesbian, but people that are of interest to our community.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make, and you definitely have such a wide variety of guests throughout the 300 episodes. Yeah. Can you point out to one or two favorites or a theme, some moment in the past, years that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. What's my favorite show? A friend of mine, Bill Miller, is a lecturer aboard ship, and he always is asked, what's your favorite ship? And he says, the one I'm on now. So I really mean that. My favorite interview is whichever one I'm doing now.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, there you go. But I guess if you had to say a theme, something that has obviously been in the news the last decade is marriage equality.
Right.
And I don't think I anticipated that we would be doing so many shows over the last 6 years, 300 episodes, focused on what I think is really one of the great civil rights issues of our time, marriage equality.
Absolutely.
So to have that as a chronicle, I'm really proud.
So back in 2009 when it started, was that the biggest challenge for the community at the time? And since then, what evolution?
Well, I think when you still have in over 30 states in the United States governments that can fire someone just for being gay, when you have ISIS and other radical groups around the world who literally are throwing gay men and lesbians from the top of buildings to kill them, when it is literally deadly to be openly gay in dozens of countries around the world, the greatest challenge facing us is not marriage equality. I think it's been the one that the news media has glommed onto. I think it's been a window, though, for a lot of people to explore other issues of the LGBT community. Personally, what I have learned the most about sitting at this table are the issues of importance to gay youth and the transgender community. I have really gotten an education in the issues facing our transgender brothers and sisters.
You certainly share their challenges and celebrate their wins all at the same time. Yeah. Talk to us about how your interests and your life experiences have led you to this seat.
Well, boy, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I often quote my grandmother who raised me, went to school in theater in upstate New York after going to a Catholic military school, which I think gave me a lot of discipline. And then I wanted to go into theater, but I realized early on that I liked being behind the scenes more. I liked interviewing people versus being on stage. So after a career in public relations, I moved to San Francisco, now 29 years ago, and we've represented a lot of people, everyone from George Lucas, the Port of San Francisco. We've worked with 5 different mayors. We've worked with dozens of nonprofits. I think the work that's been most gratifying to me over the years has been working with the LGBT community and specifically with a lot of AIDS, HIV service organizations. Because when I moved to town, AIDS was the big threat facing our community.
Right.
And to see it evolve over the last 3 decades and tell those stories and help people literally get word out about saving lives, that's, I think, the most important work I've done.
And I have to say, looking forward to the next 300. What's the hope there?
Well, I would love this to keep going. I mean, I'll be frank, I would love this show to go national. You know, when I was a little boy, the idea of being openly gay wasn't even a concept, certainly not being married. But being an openly gay host, having a show that was about LGBT issues, that wasn't on anyone's radar.
Right.
So I'd love this show to continue if viewers like it, and who knows, maybe it'll go national.
Well, you do a wonderful job being the voice of this community. Thank you so much for handing the keys over, but the wheel is back to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Karli. Boy, she's a pro. I learned from her. Well, over the next 30 minutes, we're going to take a look at some episodes which I think are especially memorable. We're going to start with the person who told the tales of the city, Mr. Armistead Maupin. Welcome back to the 300th episode of 10%, the longest-running LGBT TV show in California history. You know, for our 100th episode, we also did something special, and the guest was obvious. Tales of the City author and gay activist Armistead Maupin. Let's take a look and a listen as he talks about his friend, the late, great Rock Hudson, and his historic part in Tales of the City.
I met Rock that spring before Tales of the City started.
Which was 76, 75, yeah.
It was actually 35 years ago yesterday, if I may place this in
wow,
time.
Of course.
And he had invited a bunch of us, a bunch of gay men, up to his suite at the Fairmont Hotel for drinks after dinner. We'd all gone out to dinner together. And I had bragged to him that I had this thing that I'd written that was going to be in the Chronicle the next day. And bless his heart, he went down to the desk clerk at the Fairmont and got what they used to call the Bulldog edition.
Yeah, the Bulldog edition, the early one.
The night before.
Right.
And stood up, somewhat drunkenly, and said, I have a little reading I'd like to do. And he read the first chapter of Tales of the City the night before it appeared in the newspaper.
I've never heard that story. That's amazing.
Well, and it's so bizarre because Mary Ann references him, or rather her mother does. She's on the phone to Mary Ann who's saying, I'm not coming home to Cleveland, and her mother's saying, oh no, darling, it's dangerous out there. Your father and I were watching Macmillan and Wife.
People ask me sometimes if I watch my shows, and with rare exceptions, the answer is no. This is like old home week for me. Always great to hear Armistead, probably someone who's done more for equality for LGBT people than, well, packs of legislators. Next up, we're going to take a look at Bobby Rivers, the first openly gay host of VH1. Before there was Facebook, before there was Twitter, there was Bobby Rivers. Let's take a look. VH1 was, I mean, I remember just thinking, God, this is the coolest thing in the world. You were starting a trend. I mean, there would not be social media, there would not be celebrity TV, there would not be reality TV without VH1.
You know, I didn't think about it like that, and you're right. There was MTV, which was really young, and then VH1 was sort of like for the baby boomer. It was for the audience that was watching 30-something was watching VH1. So there were artists that MTV wouldn't play. We said, oh, well, we're Tracy Chapman.
Yeah. Tracy
Chapman could not get played on MTV, but we played her on VH1. VH1 gave me a talk show. You know, and I don't know if I.
And what was the name of the show? Was it the Bobby Rivers Show?
No, it was called Watch Bobby Rivers.
Yeah.
So they put my name in the title, and that came about because I'm such a hardcore classic film fan, and they would, and MTV, VH1 rather, VH1 got great guests at that time. And when you look at it now they got Snooki, but we were getting Norman Mailer and Meryl Streep and Paul.
Yeah, I mean, you know, putting Snooki up. Of course, the problem is now there are people who don't know who Norman Mailer and Meryl Streep are, but they're like Snooki.
Snooki. Yeah.
Yeah. How does that make you feel?
Old.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, you know what? I mean, God bless Snooki. You know, she's got. I would love to have a book deal. I would love to have a TV show. But you know what? You should open your mind up and know other people in America's pop culture. You know, it's not just about these reality shows, celebutants who have come up.
Right.
You know.
Well, I can certainly say I never thought that I would be talking about Snooki on an LGBT TV show. But see, there you go, the wonder of TV. Well, from Bobby Rivers and VH1, we go to some other musical guests. Next, my conversation with Jason Brock, who knocked it out of the park when he sang on The X Factor. Let's listen to him tell us what it was like singing in front of an international audience for Simon Cowell and, gasp, Britney Spears.
When I got the chance to be in front of the judges like Simon and Brittany, and they were so, well, okay, Simon was kind of not so nice, and he gave me awful looks, and but he was converted. Once I started singing, he was like, wow, okay, you can actually sing. You're not just crazy. Because
because your opening was a bit, you know, Baby Jane.
Yes, it was. It really made me look like I was totally like delusional.
Or your meds are off.
Exactly. So, and then Brittany, I love Brittany. I gave Brittany a special hello, and I told her like hello from my boyfriend in Japan, and we actually spoke a little Japanese, and I was surprised she did too. But I knew that she had a big fan base there, so.
Breaking news, I just heard from the crew right here on the set of 10% that Karli Mullane is a huge Britney Spears fan. So I tell you what, Karli, I'm going to talk to Jason and see if I can get you an autograph. So just, you know, keep your boots on. You know, someone once said that God is everywhere. Sometimes he can even be found in a church. Well, our next guest, one of the ones that moved me the most over the years, Sister Ruth Hall, talking about taking God to the streets in the AIDS era. Take a listen.
And I got the same feeling from them that I had when I was a kid. I was born in '49. So by 55, 56, and so on, the peace movement was really starting to take off because we were always being told they're going to drop the bomb. You know, Russia's got the bomb, this one's got the bomb. And it was like this thing that was just hovered over you that was evil and frightening, and yet you didn't know what it was. And I just got the exact same feeling talking to these friends who were getting sick.
About AIDS, HIV, that it was...
Well, it wasn't even called that. It was just people getting sick. You know, it was either Haitians or gays.
Yes.
And I remember one of our brothers dying, and just before he died, he said, I don't know how am I going to convince my parents I'm Haitian. You know, I mean, there was that... That
kind of dark humor.
Something.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything that anybody actually...
Right.
And then it became grids and you know... And
so I mean, you and Family Link have been very much part of the whole story of AIDS, HIV in Northern California.
Well, Family Link started as a response to what was happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that you would be doing this sort of work when you went into the sisterhood?
You know, I never thought I would be buying condoms in a habit for a kid, or, you know, I mean, various and sundry things that I have done. I thought, oh my goodness.
You know, Sister Ruth has got to be the hippest nun since Whoopi Goldberg in Sister Act. I tell you, if I had had nuns like that in school, well, things might have been very different. Next up for our 300th episode of 10%, my conversation with Yigat Pura, winner of Top Chef Desserts, talking about not sweet things, but about how things were difficult growing up gay in his native Istanbul, Turkey. Let's take a look.
Being gay in Turkey is definitely difficult. You know, now I think some of the major universities have gay clubs, and there's a very small pride celebration in Istanbul, but, you know, it's still not a comfortable place to walk out and be proud. And the government, as secular as it is and as forward-thinking as it is, it definitely does have some backward views on what it means to be a homosexual or a queer person in society.
I mean, I've been to Istanbul several times, and in one sense it struck me as very quote-unquote gay. I mean, it's certainly a very male society.
It's a very male society, and men tend to have this camaraderie, which most Western people confuse for being gay.
Yeah, I mean, I was there with straight friends, and they were like, "We're all these guys holding hands and arms around." I said, "That's not gay."
You know, ironically, I'll tell you this funny story, and that'll kind of explain the story. When I was 8 years old, my father took me to Topkapı Palace, which is a big palace where the sultans used to have their, you know, way. And then I remember during the tour, they took us to the harem, and then they took us to the sultan's quarters, and then they said there was a secret back door to a secret harem that a couple of the sultans used to have, where they used to entertain young men. I remember thinking as a kid, I was like, wow, that sounds fascinating. And I asked my dad about it, and my dad was like, don't ask too many questions.
Yeah. It's great seeing that interview with Yigat, and glad to know that he is now a permanent part of California's culinary landscape. But for our next guest, someone that I grew up with on TV, the one and only statuesque Catwoman herself, Julie Newmar. You hear about this role in a new TV series called Batman, which I understand you had never heard of.
No.
And they came to you and said, we have this character called Catwoman, we want you to create it. What did you think?
Well, they give you the script first, and the script was brilliant. It was so easy to do. It's when you just put your makeup on, put your costume on, and walk on stage and say the lines. And it becomes so popular as it has after, what now, 45 years? And so many copies and so many renditions of it, which is a very good thing. It's good to have all these different versions and have many people play the part. Because I kind of think of it like Carmen. I mean, there isn't just one soprano to sing Carmen. Actually, is she a soprano? Anyway, there's lots, and it'll go on beyond me.
Wow, the original Catwoman, Julie Newmar. Now we can say what becomes a legend most? Well, an interview on 10%. And of course, she has become an icon to drag queens all over the world. Of course, for her role in To Wong Foo with Love, Julie Newmar. Well, next, someone that Julie may have inspired. After we come back from our break for this 300th episode of 10%, our conversations with the First Lady of San Francisco, Donna Sachet. I'm David Perry. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm David Perry, host and creator of 10%, California's longest-running LGBT TV show. And for today, our 300th episode is celebrating some of my favorite interviews from years past. Next up, a conversation with someone who has been truly tireless in her devotion to the community, the one and only Donna Sachet. You said that this is a character with a mission.
Yes.
When did you really start to find that mission? I mean, without exaggeration, you've given hundreds, probably thousands of hours now back to the community.
Well, I'm one of many. I mean, I often say I walk on the shoulders of those before me, and I know some of them. That's what's incredible to me. You know, Cleve Jones was at City Hall today when the marriage announcements were made from Supreme Court, and he was there. And, you know, I've gotten to know Gavin Newsom and people before that. You know, Willie Brown was very instrumental in a lot of things that happened for the LGBT community.
Yeah, one of the first people in the assembly that talked about gay rights.
Bravely did that, you know, and beyond politicians. I mean, I've gotten to know Gilbert Baker, who created the flag. I know Jose Saria, who ran for office, you know, in the 60s, long before Harvey Milk, and got 6,000 votes and made people sit up and pay attention. So knowing those pioneers, I just feel like I've got this ongoing mission to keep their work going and take it to the next level. And right now, I think the gay community, after this marriage thing, is going to be sitting back saying, okay, well, what is next? It's you know, there's still things out there, but a lot of it is not so easy. It's not like changing a law. It's changing a mind, changing an attitude, and eliminating fear, which is just rampant.
I got to tell you, there are a lot of miles under those high heels. Donna Sachet, thank you for all you do. You know, before Laverne Cox and before Caitlyn Jenner, well, the transgender community was fighting for its rights and sometimes fighting for its community members' lives. One of those people who has been a tireless advocate for the transgender community has been a frequent guest on 10%. Let's listen now to our conversation with Mason Davis.
We have two new laws that went into effect on January 1st. One that strengthens our non-discrimination laws throughout the state. Now, gender identity and expression are very explicit protected categories throughout California law. It's kind of dry, it's kind of policy wonky, but it means that now employment posters in everybody's workplace and school handbooks will now show that transgender people are clearly protected against discrimination throughout the state.
Now, this is a big deal on a personal level for our community, but what does this mean legally, not only for people in the state of California, but in the country and beyond?
Well, it really says that California stands behind all members of our community. We want to make sure that everybody has access to good jobs, good schools, good health care, and that we should be all judged by what we do, what we contribute, not by bias.
Mason Davis, one of my heroes. I got to thank him and the Transgender Law Center for their continuing work, but also for educating a stupid gay white boy like me about the issues facing my trans brothers and sisters. Someone who represents that community, actually many communities with great aplomb, is someone we're going to speak to now, Cecilia Chung, someone who knows what it's like to live with AIDS, HIV, and combat transphobia on a daily basis. Let's take a look. You wear many cultural hats, many identities. Do you ever stop and think, wow, that's a lot? I've become an internationally known advocate for people living with HIV/AIDS. I've become an internationally known advocate for the transgender community. And certainly you're very high profile in the Asian Chinese community. Is it ever just too much on those shoulders?
Because of all the lessons that I've learned and all the experience I had through my own journey, that there are a lot of similarities in many different communities. And interestingly, I've served on the Human Rights Commission for 7.5 years. And what it came down to for me is that it's all about human rights, fundamentally. And it's what kind of quality of lives that we fundamentally deserve and we are all entitled to as human beings.
Right.
So and so rather than looking at what boxes we have to check on a form, we should be asking ourselves that basic questions. You know, what are the common goals we are trying to achieve? So instead of saying that, oh, I'm like taking on this community, I'm taking on that community, I'm going back to the basic.
Cecilia Chung, I tell you, that gal is fierce. If I'm ever in an alley fight with a bigot, I want her by my side. You know that old movie, Ghostbusters, Who You Gonna Call? Well, when it comes to the question of who to call that's an authority on LGBT legal issues, well, there's only one answer, really, Kate Kendell. One of the few people we've had on numerous times over the years on this show. Kate is best known for her work fighting for marriage equality. In this segment, she talks about the repercussions of that Indiana law that briefly made things very hard for the LGBT community in that state. Take a look.
The bill that passed in Indiana allows a person using religious faith as their belief, as their justification, to refuse to follow anything law.
So hi, I don't like you, Kate, because your hair color is against my religion. So
Yep. And it's I think it's a draconian law. I think it's a huge step backward on everything we stand for as a country to protect the most vulnerable from being discriminated against based on who they are. But it also makes very clear, we may win marriage in June, but we're not done.
Well, of course, Kate Kendell and I were both prophetic in that interview. We both predicted that horrible Indiana law would be repealed, and it was. You know, it's been an incredible 6 years, 300 episodes here behind the desk of 10%, and it's been my honor to be here with you. And I've interviewed many incredible people. But in a very special and personal way, the person who ends this very special show is someone near and dear to my heart, and the only one of our 11 featured interviews who, unfortunately, won't be here tonight to celebrate with us. The Venerable Anthony Bryan Turney was my best friend and mentor for 30 years. Openly gay deacon in the Episcopal Church, executive director of the Names Project AIDS Memorial Quilt, a Grenadier Guard outside of Queen Elizabeth's Buckingham Palace. He was quite simply an exceptional man. Here he talks about what it was like living through those awful AIDS years and what it was like a couple of years ago to see young people, especially young gay men, forgetting what AIDS had done to this community. Let's take a look at my last conversation on camera with the venerable Anthony Turney. I go through the Castro, and 25 years ago I was in my 20s, and boy, AIDS was a daily part of my life. You saw it, you experienced it, you worried about it, and now I see and hear of young men in their 20s pretending like it's something no worse than a toothache.
Yeah, it reminds me of what it was like, you know, in the 70s before AIDS, when men got all kind of STDs and just went and got a shot for them, and everything was fine. My fear, and I think the fear of a lot of people, is that we not get into a place of a kind of complacency, where now the feeling is, well, if I get infected, then they have the medications, that I can live with it.
Which rip up your liver.
I mean, the medications do terrible things. And so I think we have to be constantly vigilant and educating about what this disease really means, particularly, I think, among young gay men who, like you and I were when we were their age. I think, you know, you feel you're invincible.
You're going to live forever.
And you're going to live forever. So I think we have to be very careful to do everything we can to ensure that there isn't this sense of complacency.
Right. Anthony Turney died on July 4th, 2014, the 38th anniversary of his becoming a U.S. citizen. I was privileged in life to be his friend and was holding his hand when he died. You know, for 300 episodes, I've been privileged also to be here speaking to you. My grandma used to say, son, you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you must have been meant to listen twice as much as you were meant to talk. Well, I've been listening a lot to all of you, and thank you for that opportunity. But now, in my last few moments of our 300th show, I want to say, it's not always about being gay, it's about being happy. So go out there and give some happiness to all of our communities. Now, I'd like to bring in our producer, Michael Mikhail, with the official 10% cake. Thank you all for celebrating with us. We'll see you next week.